Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here and thanks for checking out my podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell for new episodes. You can also find Shine Without Shame on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'm doing a special podcast where I'm going to share some of my personal observations that are going on in the world with people, with attitudes, with beliefs, and I will just share what I've been witnessing through my work as a life coach and in conversation with family and friends. So I'm hoping this is insightful, and it's just going to be a few comments and some thoughts, nothing that's too deep. I mean, it'll be deep, but I won't be spending an hour on this on these topics just because, it's just me. This month, I thought I would do something a little different and just share from my own personal experiences and observations. So here we go. One of the ideas that I wanted to explore was the idea of belonging, the sense of belonging as an individual, as someone in a family, in a community, in a country, in the world. And I think because, well, it seems like there's always something going on these days in the world that's challenging, that's really hard to kind of deal with or accept. And there's a lot of oppression and injustice and atrocities. These aren't new developments, but I don't know about you. It feels like to me they're intensifying. And I think also because of our global connection and communication and awareness, we learn about what's going on in our own country, but also in other parts of the world so quickly now. Things change on a dime, from day to day, moment to moment. So we all, I'm sure, are on our toes if we're engaging on some level with the world around us. And I know for some people, they probably aren't engaging that much, at least maybe in this period of their life, because they're going through some really heavy, maybe painful or traumatic experiences. And maybe that's causing them to be a little more secluded and isolated, even independent of a pandemic. But I think for those of us who are able to sort of get out and kind of, live life and interact with people, it's intense out there. So this idea of belonging to me means it's really about a sense of security, feeling secure in the world, in our own personal lives. And it seems pretty natural, it seems quite natural that we would want to feel secure. It's about survival, but it's also just about feeling, I think, stable in life. So it's very normal to have that desire. But I think that sometimes wanting to belong and wanting to feel secure in that sense of belonging takes over when maybe sometimes we need to take a step back and look at our own personal feeling and belief about what we need to feel like we belong in the world. So I'm thinking about the idea of accepting ourselves. I think that self-acceptance, which is a very, I know, kind of big, broad topic, but self-acceptance really leads to feeling like you belong in the world. And I'm not suggesting that's easy work, self-acceptance. It can take years, it can take a lifetime to feel like you're good with who you are, flaws and all. So I have been noticing that more people do feel, or people express this feeling of wanting to feel like they belong. Maybe they don't use the exact word belong, but I think that people want to feel accepted. We all do, and we want to feel like we have a place where we can be ourselves and be respected and appreciated. But I've been reflecting on this a bit in my own personal life and also in conversations I've had with family, with friends, and in the work I do as a life coach. So self-acceptance, in my words, is about respecting who you are, honoring who you are, knowing that you're not perfect, but knowing that you are at least trying to live life, if hopefully, to the best of your ability, even making mistakes, but just accepting every day, you know what? I did my best. And maybe I improved in some area of life, it's the idea of calling yourself to account, I think, about what you accomplish every day, and maybe areas where you need to focus a little bit more. So personally, I know for me, if I when I get to a place where I've kind of worked through a challenge, or maybe something that's caused me some grief or pain, in a relationship or in a circumstance, like, I don't know, a situation at work, when I've kind of worked through and acknowledged, what my role was in that, and where I maybe dropped the ball, but also where I handled my business, where I showed up and did my best. As I do that work of acknowledging that, it allows me to just kind of be okay. I sleep better at night. And maybe you can relate to that, this idea of sort of taking stock. And I think that the more we do that regularly, the more that allows us to kind of sleep well at night, but also realize that, we're doing our best. But that does require action, requires kind of action and assessing and readjusting. So that to me all ties back into this sense of belonging. I think when you do the work of self acceptance, and it may not be something you can just do in one day, I think it really is a process over time of self acceptance. But when you do that work, I think that allows you to feel good about who you are, even with the imperfections, even with your mistakes. And then I think that also maybe also allows you to feel good about your relationships, or maybe, I know I've experienced this as I've gotten clearer about who I am and what I value and what I, don't value. And I do that work of self acceptance. That does sometimes change the relationships that I'm willing to maintain. Sometimes I have just felt like, you know what, I can't maintain this relationship. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like it's based on honesty and truth and trustworthiness. So it just, I don't think is where I need to be spending time and energy. And interestingly enough, and I've said this before on the podcast, I notice that when I feel that way about a relationship, like, I just, it doesn't seem like this is, this is valuable, or this is meaningful. And maybe I step away from that relationship, no drama, and not necessarily a conversation. Sometimes the situation, I think, requires a conversation, but sometimes it doesn't, in my experience. So when I step away, I notice that other person, they don't actually follow me, so to speak. In other words, they don't reach out. They don't say, "Hey, what's going on? I haven't talked to you in a while." Or, "Hey," sometimes they just leave it be, which also is a confirmation to me that, well, okay, we're sort of both in the same place about this, even if we're not going to have a conversation about it. And of course, having a conversation is is challenging sometimes, but it's necessary sometimes. All that to say is, as I get clear about who I am, and I feel this sense of kind of self-respect, self-honor, I'm just clear about where I'm willing to put my energy and time, and where it seems fruitful. When it doesn't seem fruitful, then I usually make a change. And that feeds into a sense of belonging, because I usually will then, maybe not even consciously, but I think as I continue to evolve and do my personal work, I start to consciously kind of put the vibe out. I think you may know what that feels like, but if you don't, I think it's just more about how I think and how I feel in the world, even without saying it. It starts to attract different things if I get clear and I start to feel more positive about my life. So often I'll attract maybe a new friend or a new relationship into my life. And it's one that's based on honesty and trustworthiness and accountability and respect and equality and love. Then I start to feel like I belong more in the world. So that's just one example, but there are so many other ways that this works. But I think it all comes back to self-acceptance. Again, I'm acknowledging that's work. And to get to a place of self-acceptance, that can take, for some of us, that can take a lot longer than for others, depending on how much pain and how many wounds we have, or just even where our beliefs are or our values are around relationships. Maybe we haven't had healthy boundaries or healthy ideas about what a good relationship is. So it can take time to unravel all of that. But I think it's worth it to feel secure in the world, to feel like you belong. There's really nothing better than that. But I do believe it starts from within each of us. Of course, other people can see who we are, truly are, and value us and respect us and love us and welcome us. And that's wonderful. I think it's a mutual kind of reciprocal process. But I believe that process shouldn't be void of us doing our own work to accept who we are and to continually do better, be better, live a life of love and honesty and respect and mutuality. So those are some thoughts I have about belonging. Another concept that continually comes to mind, especially in these days of, well, it's been years, I think, of people who are influential, people who are leaders, people who are in the public eye or who just are popular, even if they're not quote unquote famous. More and more people, as we kind of go through every day, it seems like we're learning more and more people are have not operated from a place of trustworthiness or honesty or justice, and they cover up bad behavior so that they can get ahead, or so that those around them can get ahead along with them. And that's a very global, big idea, because I think it can start, well, it can be leaders who are leaders of countries or leaders of um, you know, officials in some capacity of governance, but it doesn't have to be in that area. It can be leaders of companies, or it could be community leaders. And I'm saying all this not to say that every person every person we encounter is operating from a place of ill intention. But I think that we're becoming more aware of corruption, of misuse of power, of deception. And I'm certainly not an expert on any of that, except I feel like in my own personal life, day to day, what that boils down to for me is trusting my instincts and also using my intuition. And I just want to be clear, I don't believe that the people who are corrupt or deceptive or unjust are people in high places. They can be people in our own families, in our own, communities. But in on whatever level, whatever capacity we may come across, um, people who we just have a feeling that we can't totally trust. And again, these can be in our own personal relationships, but I think that we do have to learn that we can and believe that we can trust our instincts and use our intuition to get clear about what we're observing or what we're feeling or what we're participating in some, in a relationship, or it could be a work relationship, it could be a family relationship, friends. We have instincts, as I'm sure everybody listening and watching already knows this, but for me, it's just like a really good reminder to think about why we have instincts. They're an innate part of us. At least that's my understanding. We don't really, we do need to develop them, but they already exist, instincts, because we have physical instincts that tell us when we're hungry or when we're exhausted, and um we have instincts just about a situation that doesn't feel right, but we still, I think, have to work on developing them so that we sharpen them and we trust them and we don't question them. And I know personally for me that has been a journey over many, many years of learning to trust my instincts. And the intuition that we all have is a little bit different than instincts. So my understanding is that instincts they're really about a reaction to something we're experiencing. It could be internally in our bodies on a physical level, or as we know, it can be in our environment, including, intimate relationships. Instincts are really a reaction to a situation, to something that is in our awareness. And the way I've learned to define or describe intuition is more about insight. It's not so much an intellectual thought, or it's not about intellectual knowledge. So intuition, the way I usually experience it, is something that's very, very brief. I like to think of it, it's like a flash, like uh maybe like a flash of light, or something that just happens really quickly across my consciousness. But it's, to me, it's, for the way I've experienced it, it's more than just intellectual consciousness. It's really about some sort of like insight or a sense. But when I experience it, it's usually brief. And like I've heard someone describe it, that the first voice that kind of crosses your mind when you're in a situation, that first voice is usually the right one to follow. It's usually the truth, but we often ignore the first thought we have. So I'm not suggesting that we hone in on our instincts and our intuition just so we can call out all the bad behavior in the world. Although I think that's important, or at least to be aware. Maybe we're not really in a place where we can call things out always, but I think we need to trust. We need to get better at trusting ourselves when we feel a certain way about a situation, something someone said, something someone did, because it's usually so subtle how we gain knowledge or an understanding about a certain situation. It's so subtle, but and so I think that we need to get really good at recognizing, not dismissing what we sense. And I don't want to get caught up really in the difference, so much about, the difference between instinct and intuition. I was just sharing my understanding of those two faculties, but all that to say is we have them. They're a part of who we are. And in some cultures in the world, they're more enhanced than others, of course, because of how those cultures operate. I think in our culture, in Western culture, that's where I live, at least in the States, instincts are really valued, but intuition, not so much. And if it's acknowledged at all, it's usually because it's usually associated with just women. But my understanding is that men also all people, all humans, have the faculty of intuition. I don't know. I understand it's a whole nother conversation why we don't value, especially don't value intuition, but I think it would be worth all of us taking a little bit more time to get clear about those two parts of our kind of abilities and start to cultivate them a little more with a little more strength, just so we can be clear. What you do after getting clear is, every situation is different, but to be able to discern, this is something, and it's not always, to me, it's not always about bad or good, but it's just getting clear about maybe something that was unsaid, but that I sensed. I think you probably can follow what I'm saying, but it seems to me that we just need to work on these skills more. They're not the only way we can gather information or have knowledge or insight about what we experience in the world. There are many other ways, of course, but those two seem to be underdeveloped for a lot of us, or for those people who really are in their instincts. I think sometimes they operate only from their instincts and maybe not from emotional intelligence or, using other faculties. In my opinion, we should just make the most of what we as humans were endowed with. So I think I'll leave it at that. And I just want to, before I put the period at the end, say my intro with these concepts and introing the idea of all of the leadership in the world that's around the world that seems to be losing ground in terms of people's trusts and respect. Of course, I'm not saying that is every single leader or official or CEO. I'm not suggesting that, but it does seem that story after story about corruption does kind of take us to a lot of people in leadership. So I think that's one area of human endeavor where we are on shaky ground, but certainly we can all in our own personal lives recognize the value of searching for truth, getting clear, and trusting ourselves that we can get to truth. We can find it and we can utilize it to make decisions in all sorts of circumstances. All right, that's that. The last area I want to reflect on is the idea of using healing tools to heal ourselves. I'm a fan of tools, and when I say tools, I'm talking. There's a myriad. I'm sure many I don't even really think about much, but I'm thinking about meditation, yoga, all sorts of healing modalities like Reiki and sound healing, and I'm sure many others, but I'll just kind of stick with that bunch because I think probably most people have had some interaction with one of those, at least one of those tools. But I've been observing over the last few 5 years or so, this reliance on healing tools to take away our pain completely and absolutely. What I mean is, many of us have maybe gone to a meditation class or gotten energy healing, Reiki, sound healing. We've, maybe gone on retreats, whatever it is, whatever you can relate to. Think about that experience and that tool. And when I think about what I've witnessed with a lot of people talking about wanting to use these tools because they want to maybe, get grounded and clear out their mind, or, kind of welcome in some fresh energy or go inward. All of that is great. I'm not at all dismissing the value of those experiences. But what I've noticed is that many people will utilize these tools, but they forget an important part of the process, which is to bring themselves into the healing process. So you can go to a meditation class, or you can go to a sound healing class, whatever it is. And you can say, all right, I'm ready. I want to heal. I want to, address some pain or some trauma, which is very brave. So that's a great first step. But if we don't acknowledge our role in that healing process, and we just wait for the tools to do all of the work, I believe we are shortchanging ourselves. And I don't believe we will get the full healing that we truly want. Now, there are probably exceptions to this. I'm not saying that I've mastered all healing tools and have, worked around the world with them, but I am on the journey of getting trained as an energy healer, which involves meditation and sound healing and some other modes. But I do believe that if we don't show up, and if we don't hold ourselves accountable, meaning acknowledge what we need to do better, or where maybe we're not stepping up, or we're not, maybe sometimes because of intense pain and trauma, where we're not maybe fully taking ownership of it so that we can let it go, then I think we are not really able to fully heal. It does require us to be present. And of course, for people who have gone to therapy or have done trauma healing, that's an intense journey. But you also know that you've had to show up in order to participate in that healing process. In other words, you couldn't just sit there or lay there and let the expert do their healing work and just assume it would all go away. We do have to show up on some level. And I'm not going to suggest I know what that looks like for every person. I'm just talking about the idea of being accountable and being a participant in our own healing work. And I guess even prayer would be another tool for healing. And the same goes with that. It's one thing to pray, and there's so many different ways to pray. So I'm not going to speak to or suggest that there's one way that's the best in terms of whether you recite your own words or you recite sacred scripture, whatever it is. But I think it's about the intention when you're praying. Whatever the praying, you can pray and ride your bike. So it's not that it has to look a certain way, but it's really about, I think, the intention and being present and really being open to receiving what will help you and allow you to be the best you can be, and to address what needs to be addressed, and to take responsibility where you need to take responsibility, and then acknowledge where other people need to take responsibility. be clear about what's yours and what's not yours. I think even through prayer that can be done, but it really, whatever the mode, whatever the tool, again, I believe it still requires us to show up and to be really honest with ourselves. We have to be willing to be open and honest, whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's sound healing, energy healing, whatever it is. We have to be willing to be open, to be vulnerable with ourselves, to admit maybe when we didn't take care of ourselves in the best way we could have, and still love ourselves, knowing that we want to move forward, we want to heal, we want to get better. Not about beating ourselves up, because you can't really move forward even one little step, one little inch a day if we're always looking at what we're not doing well. But we just have to be, I think, present and acknowledge our responsibility and be willing to be open and honest. Not easy. It's not easy, but I think if you take one little situation or one aspect of your life and you say, you know what, I am going to get really clear about what I need to be accountable for in this situation, this experience, and what I don't need to be accountable for if it belongs to somebody else, and how I need to move forward, making sure I'm taking care of myself, I'm honoring myself, the sacred self that we all embody, or getting clear that we are maybe going to have to make some hard decisions. Whatever is required, we can't get to those answers necessarily if we aren't able to be accountable, to be responsible, but to also honor who we are, that we're not perfect, that we've made mistakes, maybe some really bad mistakes, but that we want to let that go, let those painful experiences go. And in order to let them go, we have to at least acknowledge that they're there. That's step one. So healing tools, I think, are amazing. They're very powerful. Just like crystals and stones are very powerful. They came from within the earth, or on top of the earth, but within caves or in the ground. They are very powerful because of the energy that they have absorbed over long periods of time. But if we only hold a stone and wait for the stone or the crystal to take away pain or grief or sadness, a stone or a crystal can certainly remove a great deal of pain and sadness and grief. I'm not suggesting that, because as I said, I know that they're very powerful. I'm not suggesting that they can't on their own heal. But I believe that when we show up to that process and honor who we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that's when we can fully heal. And everybody has a different set of circumstances. We all have different pasts and history with our families and so on and so forth. So some of us need other people to help us, other healers, other experts to help us work through that healing process. Sometimes we can do it on our own. And I know resources are tight for many of us, so we have to sometimes get creative, but the allowing of ourselves to be present on our journey and in the moments when we are working on healing. And healing, in my words, healing is really about changing something. Moving past something, moving through something, transforming something, transcending something that has pained us, that is holding us down. So that's what healing is in my view. I only offer that because maybe that makes it less woo-hooey, if I may use that new age term. So that's what I wanted to offer about healing tools and our role in the healing process. I hope that some of these insights and thoughts and reflections and examples that I've used have been helpful, have given you maybe a different understanding about your own journey and working through challenges and thinking maybe a different way of thinking about what healing is about and what change is about, and maybe some of the tools and faculties that we need, or at least can consider in our work. I hope that's been something I've contributed on some level for you. And I'm sure for many of you who are listening and watching, you've already thought through a lot of this yourselves. So this was just another opportunity to be reminded and or just share in another person's reflections on truth and trying to get to truth and getting to a place of real healing as we go through our lives every day. I will leave it there, and I wishing you all a wonderful next year, this current year, and as we go into the next year. I'm hoping that you all find exactly what you need in terms of tools, resources, support, encouragement, love, belonging. But I would say consider that you are the most important part of all of those desires and all of those needs and wants. You're really at the center of it. And the more I think you and myself, and the more we all rely more and more on our own abilities to discern truth, to be accountable for our own lives, and to accept who we are, then we'll make that much more progress. And we'll find the power that we have inside of us, and we'll acknowledge it, and it'll start to expand more and more. So I'm wishing that for all of us. And I hope that you stay healthy in all ways, and that you are able to continue to search for joy and cultivate it in your lives and in the lives of the ones you love and care for. Take care, everybody.